budget numbers simply do not add up. That is why we say this budget is fake and fraudulent. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, under the UNC, the Public Sector Investment Program, which is supposed to be the government's flagship mechanism for driving national development, has become a shell of its intended purpose, underfunded, visionless, and lacking in innovation. The PSIP 2026, presented with much fanfare by the Honourable Minister of Finance, is nothing more than a continuation of fiscal contraction masquerading as development planning. Mr. Speaker, the numbers tell a grim story. The PSIP allocation for fiscal 2026 stands at 4.1 billion, a drastic reduction of 1.57 billion from the 5.6 billion approved in 2025. That is 27% cut to the nation's development budget, the very budget that determines how many roads are paved, how many schools are repaired, how many communities receive water, and how many lives are touched. Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt in the midterm this government will be back in this Honourable House seeking to restore the said 1.5 billion they recklessly stripped from the public sector investment program. This deliberate reduction was not an act of prudence, but one of deception designed to solely preserve the illusion of a $3 billion deficit. In truth, Mr. Speaker, what they have done is to sacrifice national development for political optics. The result is a country now forced to project less progress, less growth, and less opportunity. Mr. Speaker, this is not responsible budgeting. This is a false and misleading budget. It is based on false assumptions, untruths, imaginary scenarios, and unachievable objectives. It is simply not based on reality. When closely examined, 1/3 of the 2026 budget statement is made up of blaming the PNM for the UNC's incompetence. 1/3 praises the Prime Minister while shamelessly shouting about wins that are really losses. And the final third is made up of fantasy and blatant falsehoods. However, Mr. Speaker, this budget will create the conditions of total economic and financial disaster in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Speaker, today I intend to do three things. Number one, to state the facts of the plight of the thousands of Trinidad and Tobago citizens who are suffering under the incompetent and dishonest rule of an insincere regime that never had and never will have the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago at heart. Two, to expose the fiction, the hollow promises, the unrealistic estimates, the deception, the fluff and policy blunders that make up this budget. And three, to remind our people and this government what responsible leadership looks like, what sober management means, and why the people of Trinidad and Tobago can and must demand better. Mr. Speaker, this budget gave an opportunity for the country to gain insight into the plans and policies of the UNC government and their strategies for charting a way forward in human and economic development. After listening to the Honourable Minister of Finance presentation of this budget, it is clear that this government has absolutely no plan. And is simply making it up as they go along and making it up on the fly. Mr. Speaker, they had 10 years to prepare for office while in opposition, but this UNC can only offer vindictiveness, oppression, and mismanagement to the country. They came into office with a set of populist measures, sound bites, and promises which their advisors told them would resonate with the population. Once it sounded good, they felt the population would support it. They deceived the electorate into believing that the PNM government was deliberately punishing the population. However, as all of us know, this country just went through a very difficult decade because of external financial and economic shocks and a global pandemic, as well as domestic structural changes in our energy sector. Difficult decisions had to be made after the wild and reckless spending of the UNC during the period 2010 to 2015. That's right. The economy had to be stabilized and put on growth path. The disastrous effects of COVID-19 pandemic had to be contained and controlled to save lives and livelihoods. And the country's finances had to be prudently and properly managed. Mr. Speaker, this government would have you believe that all our economic problems and challenges disappeared on April 20th, and now salt, Moby, milk, and honey can flow. However, Mr. Speaker, it soon became clear to them that after April 28th that their hollow campaign rhetoric would not work. Now that they were in government and this country and economy is very difficult to manage. This is a very complex economy, not designed to be managed by inexperienced misfits, but those who wish to use nuclear weapons against our closest neighbor. Not understanding that if that actually occurs, we would all die from nuclear fallout. For years, we told the country and the UNC that our financial position was delicate and very susceptible to changes in the global economy. Global trade restraints, commodity price shocks, and external factors. They, of course, did not listen. And now the panic has set in because they have realized that they made to the people of Trinidad and Tobago unrealistic promises to the citizens of this country just to win an election. They have now faced with two options. Option one, they do the responsible thing and engage in conservative fiscal management, which minimizes the deficit, does not inflate the debt excessively, and mitigates the economic risks. However, they are incapable of this, Mr. Speaker, and they are too busy being populist in their response. Option two, which they have embarked upon, provides very short-term satisfaction, but would lead to severe pain for the people of this country going forward. This government has taken the irresponsible route, Mr. Speaker, which is to go against every sensible economic advice available to them. They have put in place measures which would severely inhibit and decrease revenue while planning to spend record amounts which the country simply cannot afford. As Dr. Eric Williams once said, the alternative to the PNM is chaos and confusion. Absolutely prophetic, Mr. Speaker. Under the UNC, 50,000 workers, primarily at the lower income levels. The people who live from paycheck to paycheck have cruelly and unfairly lost their jobs in the space of just 5 months. Under the UNC, since April 28th, salary payments are routinely late and sometimes not paid at all. Contrast this to the very difficult COVID-19 period, when government revenue dropped, Mr. Speaker, by some 15 billion in 1 year, yet the PNM ensured that everyone, including all daily paid and monthly paid workers and recipients of social grants and many others were paid on time. And we did for the entire 9.5 years we were in office. Not, Mr. Speaker, as we are finding pensioners going to the bank with a government check and the bank saying we have no money. Under the PNM, the people who needed the most help could feel comfortable and be assured that their social grants, such as public assistance and disability assistance, would reach them on time, not late by days or weeks into a new month, as is happening now. Under the PNM, our pensioners got their pensions on time, like clockwork, so they can buy their groceries, go to the market, pay their rent, buy their medication. Under the PNM, Tobago wasn't suffering for a water crisis. Under the PNM, loose cannon ministers weren't causing geopolitical international crises with our neighbors. On their latest live rants, under the PNM, roadsides and recreation grounds were maintained, and single mothers and breadwinners in families could have fed their children, bought books for school, and not have to line up at social services. Now, pothole and landslides abound on every road, whether main roads or secondary roads. Under the PNM, sporting, cultural, you all wake up, and community originators were getting money to carry out vital community work. Under the PNM, our youths had hope with over 50 programs. Training them in essential skills, agriculture, technical, vocational, auto repair, sound engineering, heavy machine and equipment operations, healthcare, and many others now shut off by this government. I expect that our young people who are now at a great disadvantage with the termination of all the youth initiatives are taking notice. Mr. Speaker, as the people on the ground, in the streets, on the markets, in their homes and churches, temples and mosques, from Arima to Erin, from Cedrus to Charlottesville, from Carnage to Carpichaima, and all areas in between, are saying, we give them the country to run, and we just cannot run it. Mr. Speaker, this government has irresponsibly increased the budget deficit for 2025 from 5 billion to 9 billion, is increasing the public debt to unsustainable levels, draining our foreign reserves at an exponential rate, attacking the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, even though there has been no natural disaster or global pandemic over the last 5 months, and has placed our currency under tremendous strain. Mr. Speaker, while publicly and dishonestly speaking about alleged PNM financial management, the UNC has drastically and deceitfully behind closed doors grossly overestimated revenue for 2026 and has based the budget on a highly unrealistic and false assumption. Mr. Speaker, since they were elected, they have not left the political platform and have been campaigning ever since. They still behave as if they are in opposition and have not yet settled to govern. These are serious things that they are playing with, and a dangerous mix of incompetence and political agendas, which will lead this country down a road which will inevitably result in a debt trap. That is where this government is taking us, Mr. Speaker. Over the economic precipice, and the alarm bells are already being rung. One only has to look at the most recent Standard & Poor's credit rating report, which specifically highlighted the scrapping of the Trinidad and Tobago's Revenue Authority and property tax, and other revenue-generating measures, together with increased spending and increased borrowing as the main reasons for the downgrade in our credit rating outlook from stable to negative, and by extension our economy. Mr. Speaker, independent agencies are already losing confidence in this government in a mere 5 months in office and raising concerns about where their disastrous economic policies will take us. Mr. Speaker, they will take us to decades back to their origin, to the infamous NAR government which caused so much pain that they were reduced from 33 seats to 2 in a merely 5 years. Ask any qualified independent economist, what is the true state of our economy and where these policies, if sustained for a few years, will lead us, and they will tell you unequivocally to the International Monetary Fund. Mr. Speaker, I use this budget response to issue a stark warning to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. These policies of the UNC government are an economic crisis in the making, the likes of which we have not seen in the last 40 years. The collection of promises made by this government is the single greatest conjured perpetrated upon the people of Trinidad and Tobago in history. Mr. Speaker, before I get into the substantive portion of discussion on the budget and highlighting the major areas, I want to address a common theme which the Minister of Finance tries to weave into all his presentations in this Parliament. He continues, Mr. Speaker, to claim that the PNM crashed the economy, when he knows that this is simply untrue and that all international agencies have a completely different view. Mr. Speaker, in my presentation on the Supplementary Appropriation Bill 2025, I was at length to quote the Central Bank, which published growth data for Trinidad and Tobago for the years 2022 to 2024 and into 2025. I quoted independent international agencies such as the IMF, which also confirmed 3 years of consecutive economic growth from 2022 to 2024, and prior to the arrival of this disastrous government had projected growth of 2.3% for Trinidad and Tobago in its World Economic Outlook for 2025. Mr. Speaker, the most recent Standard & Poor's report also confirms growth in our economy under the PNM for 3 consecutive years. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, if you examine the economic data presented in the UNC's own review of the economy for 2025, you will see the Minister's own documents points to economic growth under the PNM for years 2020 to 2024. So where is this alleged economic crash under the PNM? Mr. Speaker, the records prove that the claim of economic mismanagement by the PNM is absolutely not true, which is why the Minister's 2026 budget statement is fake and fraudulent. As a matter of fact, the review of the economy 2025 laid in the Parliament by the Minister of Finance clearly illustrates that this UNC government has reversed the economic recovery this country enjoyed and maintained up to 2024, which would have continued in 2025 if the PNM was still in government. The UNC has caused an almost irreversible shock to this economy, sent the country into a recession, created an economic downturn, and reversed years of painstaking work done by the PNM in rebuilding the economy after the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, at a time when energy prices are declining and projected to fall further and production is falling, this government saw it fit to damage our revenue base. They repealed the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Act for political reasons, even though all they said in their 2025 manifesto about the TTRA is that they would amend the act to make the PSA the bargaining agent for the employees in the TTRA, which was not something the PNM would have objected to. As we pointed out during the debate in the TTRA bill, the Revenue Authority would not only enhance revenue and make tax collection more efficient by capturing within the tax net, but it would also have dealt with many businesses and high-wealth individuals who have been avoiding and evading tax for many years. Mr. Speaker, did the government repeal the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Act to protect their tax-evading financiers?
Mr. Speaker, I know the Leader of the Opposition is reading a prepared text by our handlers, but I raise a standing order 48-6.
Leader of the Opposition, plainly.
I didn't hear the standing
It's
order.
the stand.
Mr. Speaker, Standing Order 48.6.
Yes, I was just about to point it out. That plainly offends 48.6. So you could rephrase it somewhat. That intention of passing the Revenue Authority bill to protect their tax evaders, it plainly, do I need, all right, I don't need any help with that. I don't think I need to remind you of the contents of that standing order, do I? So just rephrase it somewhat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Did the government repeal the Tax and Revenue Authority to protect those who have been evading taxes? But I didn't even mention a name who are evading taxes.
Use somewhat more anodyne language.
Mr. Speaker, I will just simply not go down, continue in that way. Mr. Speaker, if I can indicate that the TTR is to collect some $5 billion annually in additional revenues. However, in one ill-advised fell swoop, the government scrapped this critical revenue-generating tool along with others. What will happen, Mr. Speaker, when these unrealistic revenue estimates are not met? Either significant borrowing will have to be undertaken or they will have to cut expenditure. If the entire premise of this budget, which is a revenue estimate, is unrealistic, then the entire budget presented here is a fairy tale and a figment of their imagination. Mr. Speaker, as I said, this budget is fake and fraudulent. Mr. Speaker, the fact remains that this government is triggering a fiscal crisis in this country, stemming from a lack of revenue and common sense. On the campaign trail, we warned the country, and especially the UNC, that the financiers or the finances of this country cannot sustain the fairy tale plans, programs, and policies which they want to put in place. Mr. Speaker, we warned about the dangers of cutting revenue sources. We warned about the dangers of increasing expenditure, and we warned about a potential devaluation as their only option. We red flagged that state enterprises and some of the jewels of the crown of the state would be at risk of being privatized just to keep the government afloat. We cautioned that this government policies will throw us into a cash flow and fiscal crisis and force them to search for cash balances wherever they can. Now, we are in a mad search to raid state enterprises such as NGC, UTC, NIB, First Citizens Republic Bank, and other entities where the state has an interest just to pay wages and salaries. Mr. Speaker, I'm sounding a warning again and telling the government, leave cash balances at Unit Trust Corporation and NIB alone. They do not belong to you. Mr. Speaker, after repealing the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Act, which would have brought large, medium, and small businesses into a reasonable tax net, the opposition is getting regular reports of BIR showing up at a small business asking for VAT registration and if they have made their payments. Because of the government's incompetence and total botched fiscal management, the small man has to pay, while others laugh all their way to the bank. Mr. Speaker, apart from the fiscal crisis we have found ourselves in, this government has also thrust us into a liquidity crisis. This is a very concerning development for every citizen because not only does it affect and impact day-to-day lives of the people of this country, it also explains for late payments of salaries, the late check for social services and pensioners, and the spending freezes in the public sector. Without saying it publicly, Mr. Speaker, this government has imposed spending freezes on most areas of the public expenditure, especially goods and services, which also compromise contract employment. Mr. Speaker, apart from the revenue element, of the delicate Financial Balancing Act, government has to be concerned with liquidity and cash flow, and while both are related, they are not the same. Mr. Speaker, when the UNC took office, they admitted that the overdraft at the central bank had funds which could be utilized. The overdraft stood at 70% when they assumed office, versus the almost 100% overdraft level that we discovered when the PNM took office in 2015. They were also able to utilize unused balances withdrawn from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, as well as loans that were left in escrow for capital expenditure purposes, all sources of liquidity left by the PNM government. Mr. Speaker, the same loans they criticized the PNM for taking, they repurposed them to use for recurrent expenditure, thus stalling economic activity. Mr. Speaker, loans meant for road upgrade projects, HEC, HVIP housing, land development, for the Petrotrin workers, school construction, water supply, and many other development works were used to pay salaries. That is the state of desperation they descended into. Mr. Speaker, how did this government find themselves in this position in only 5 months? They spent the first 3 months attacking big businesses, banks, and other financial institutions. They labeled them as cartels and eroded confidence in the financial system. Mr. Speaker, excess liquidity has declined sharply from 7.3 billion in March 2025 to 3.8 billion in August of 2025, and who knows where it will go. They have drained the liquidity in the system, and there simply isn't any more for the banks to lend. Repurposing the 1.3 billion in loans for the productive sector has further drained liquidity, taking its level not seen in over a decade. Mr. Speaker, if liquidity dries up, payment of salaries is the least of our worries. We have debt service payments to make, which are critical and timed across the year. Missing one payment can lead to default, which can see the government impose even more severe austerity measures on the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, even in the forex markets, the increased rates for accessing forex through credit card purchases can translate to increased prices for consumers. Mr. Speaker, the investment grade rating BBB, BBB minus by Standard & Poor's is all due to the good work of the People's National Movement. Mr. Speaker, I want the country to note that the negative outlook for our economy issued by Standard & Poor's is a forward-looking factor which is based on the future policies and plans of the UNC and whatever the Minister of Finance told Standard & Poor's. Let me repeat, the retention of our investment-grade credit rating is all due to the PNM, and the downgrade to a negative outlook is all due to the UNC. Mr. Speaker, I say this without fear of contradiction, that this government has declared war on the lower-income workers of this country. Out of vindictiveness, this government began putting workers on the breadline. It started with a trickle at first, but now, Mr. Speaker, some 50,000 workers have either been terminated or lost their job as a direct result of the hand of this government. The UNC firing squad celebrates and gets sinister pleasure in firing people who they perceive as PNM and therefore undeserving of a livelihood in this country. They are not concerned that they are affecting families, breadwinners, children, and impacting real people and the lives of this country. Mr. Speaker, there is currently a humanitarian crisis in this country caused by the termination of thousands of workers by this uncaring government. Surprisingly, not a single word was mentioned of this crisis at the UN General Assembly. They say they love you, yet they pound you down with a hammer of vengeance. And it is clear that the UNC does not care about the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Speaker, over 10,000 CPEP workers, 4,000 forestry workers, 400 workers in WASA from CEOs to janitors, and thousands more have suffered under the hands of this callous government. Mr. Speaker, not even the state enterprises and ministries escaped their firing squad. People have been dismissed from CAL, RDC, TNTech, NIDCO, FCB, WASA, NEDCO, Heritage, HDC, TSTT, PARIA, various ministries and other constituency offices at Kamutu, Manzanilla. UNC firing squad is in full effect. Citizens have been made to suffer and beg for a small change for groceries and line up for social services which this government cannot even pay on time. Imagine this, Mr. Speaker, having been fired from your job and then having to suffer the indignity of being told by a government minister to apply for social services and your public assistance checks cannot even arrive on time. Meanwhile, a senior minister tells the people, stay home and cook. Cook with what? Mr. Speaker, threats by this government have left thousands of workers in this country fearful of victimization and fearful of their future. Mr. Speaker, incomes are lost, spending in the economy will decline, families will be affected. This will have a negative economic impact, but more so create a human and social crisis. Mr. Speaker, this conservative estimates from our analysis show that the cumulative impact of these mass terminations can result in as much as a 1.5 to 2 billion decline in GDP over the next year. But this is not just the leader of the opposition or the PNM saying this. Trinidad Guardian, Mr. Speaker, September the 14th, 2025, URP CPEP job cuts may harm economy, communities, and economists. Economist Professor Carl Theodore was blunt. Whenever you interfere with the incomes of low-income people, you are interfering with the very life of the economy. Theodore pointed out to the well-worn but seldom measured principle of marginal propensity to consume, the idea that those who earn the least spend the most proportionally on local goods and services. Poor people don't sit on money, they spend it on food, transport, small shops and books for their children. That keeps the economy ticking, he said. Mr. Speaker, you cannot shock an economy with termination of 50,000 workers and not have a drastic economic impact. But this is much more than an economic shock. This is a people issue. This is a humanitarian crisis. These people will not flock to our social services to seek reprieve. These people will now flock to our social services to seek reprieve. Mr. Speaker, in true UNC firing squad style, this government, upon assuming office, proceeded to fire state board members, senior management, persons who were serving, who had given off their time and effort as professionals. The Prime Minister herself attacked them in a most vicious manner, calling them shameless for not resigning. Mr. Speaker, the state enterprises sector plays a vital role in this economy, providing vital services, acting as implementing agencies and acting as pillars in critical sectors. They also facilitate investment in our economy through the relevant investment programs. Mr. Speaker, there are 141 state entities and boards impacting every sector in our economy, which plays differing roles, some critically pivotal and some less so, but this sector also contributes significantly to economic growth. Dismantling boards, some of which belong to publicly traded companies, disrupt the governance of these entities, their strategic direction and management, in most cases, its operations as well, because they cannot enter into contracts, gain higher level of approvals for operational activities and in some cases even conduct financial transactions. Mr. Speaker, this government has removed boards of the state enterprises sector and has ground this vital part of our economy to a practical halt, or at least stymied their operations. How many of these boards have been reappointed in the last 5 months? What this government has done is slow down economic growth and impact this sector. Mr. Speaker, only one has to look at the disruption of the operations of the Exim Bank, essential forex window, as a result of government incompetence in its transaction. The window provides a facility for the importation of essential goods like food and pharmaceuticals. This window was created by the PNM administration during the height of COVID pandemic to allow this country to have access to these essential items. Mr. Speaker, the government has created major problems by the mishandling of their transition, and I quote, Trinidad Express, July 16, 2025, Exim Bank Forex disruption hits SMEs. Small and medium-sized businesses in the country are facing growing strain amid a sudden halt in foreign exchange allocations from the state-owned export-import bank the Express conferred. According to a source directly affected by the situation, the Exim Bank has not allocated US dollars to any of its clients in recent weeks, citing bureaucratic delays caused by a shift in ministerial oversight and the absence of a functioning board. It is irresponsible management of the economy on the part of this government, and this has potential to reverse the growth recovery trend I discussed earlier. Mr. Speaker, look at NGC. A chairman was appointed, and a month later his appointment was revoked. And an attorney who has questions to answer in the court was appointed. How could we be serious when we make decisions like these about an entity as critical as NGC, which is a linchpin in our energy industry? As it relates to FCB, Mr. Speaker, as if it wasn't enough, we have this government interfering in our delicate financial sector. First Citizens Bank was founded in Trinidad and Tobago in 1993 under a PNM government through the strategic merger of 3 existing financial institutions, NCB, Workers Bank, and the Trinidad and Tobago Cooperative Bank. This merger aimed to create a stronger and more competitive local financial institution. Mr. Speaker, FCB has become a highly successful financial institution in Trinidad and Tobago. It's a publicly traded company which allows citizens to own shares in the bank. It falls under the regulation of the central bank. An exchange commission, and among other things, is governed and regulated by the Companies Act. But despite all of this, there's a serious issue of the government's interference in FCB. I was urged to call upon the government to come clean on the matter of the CEO when we were receiving conflicting reports. Some were stating she resigned, some reports stated she was on vacation, and others suggested she was about to retire. Mr. Speaker, you cannot have this level of uncertainty regarding the head of one of our pillars of our financial sector, a publicly traded company. It shatters confidence. Why, therefore, are government ministers getting involved in the management of a publicly traded financial institution? Mr. Speaker, that is not good governance. This can be called a political hijack of a public bank. Mr. Speaker, what message does this send to the people of Trinidad and Tobago? What message does it send to investors, to the international community, to every citizen who entrusts their savings, their mortgages, and their future at FCB? I want to warn the nation to keep a close eye on the government's dealing with First Citizens Bank your savings could very well be at risk. Mr. Speaker, this government is making a habit of attacking big business in this country, including some of the largest non-energy contributors to the economy, employment and government revenue. They have gone out of their way to collect and divulge private information from the central bank, something that is clearly illegal. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance have continued the false narrative of the existence of a forex cartel and threatened to expose the so-called cartel. But, Mr. Speaker, this turned out to be totally fabricated on another distraction of this government. Fortunately, the central bank governor, in a presentation to the media on September 5, 2025, stated clearly for the record that he had no evidence of any forex cartel. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to a serious injustice which has been inflicted on the people of this country. I speak of the heartless mass terminations of a non-renewal of contract of workers across the country by this UNC firing squad. Mr. Speaker, I was shocked to hear a minister, a former trade unionist, say that sending home workers is collateral damage. Mr. Speaker, our single mothers and school children being described as collateral damage, and this from a government who supposedly cares. Obviously, no Prime Minister, no government, if they honestly believe this, loves you. For almost 10 years, the PNM government kept the unemployment rate down. Even though the worst COVID-19 pandemic, we ensured that salaries, grants, and other facilities stayed in place so that affected people in this country, many of whom formed the most vulnerable, had the ability to feed themselves. Critically important, no public servants on the establishment were sent home. Mr. Speaker, as I said, after April 28th, 50,000 persons have been fired in a mere 5 months. Mr. Speaker, if we think about it, the scorched earth strategy, the UNC has impacted on almost 200,000 citizens. How can that be an economic policy to deliberately put such a large number of people on the breadline? Mr. Speaker, apart from the social impact, there's also the economic impact. The loss of 50,000 incomes will negatively affect this economy, both directly and indirectly. The shops, the groceries, the parlors will feel it. The markets and vendors are already feeling the pinch. The roadside food vendors are telling us that business is slow and people are buying less. Clear signs that a recession is at hand. This is a self-induced economic contraction. We see this reflected in the negative economic growth for 2025 in the review of the economy presented by this government. For the first time, our economy has shrunk in 4 years. Mr. Speaker, I heard the Honourable Prime Minister say that the government would provide income support grants for those who lost their jobs. So let us get this straight. We fire workers who are doing something productive and then promise them grants. Obviously, the Prime Minister doesn't think so because to her, as she mentioned, are lowly grass cutters. However, they were maintaining our environment and improving the health, safety, and security of our citizens. To add insult to injury, the government is consistently, as I said, late in their payments of their salaries and grants. That is what happens when you have no plan and only operate based on hate and vindictiveness. They have pushed this unemployment rate to the worst levels in decades and worse among regional counterparts. Mr. Speaker, youth employment has always been a high figure than the national average, but the PNM government had taken deliberate steps to empower young people and provide sustainable and viable alternative employment opportunities. Mr. Speaker, we created an entire Ministry of Youth Development and National Services and developed over 50 programs where young people were being trained in various fields, from agriculture to mechanics and air condition repair, to heavy equipment operators and technicians, and to take advantage of available opportunities and anchor their own lives and futures. Mr. Speaker, they were being trained to acquire highly skilled jobs in the energy sector, such as operators, riggers, and technicians. We are all familiar with the successes of these programs. In the middle of this training and transition for young people, these programs have been abruptly halted and dismantled. I repeat to our young people, please take notice. The UNC definitely is anti-youth. Mr. Speaker, I turn to the issue of monetary policy. I cannot discuss the issue of monetary policy without discussing the central bank, which is the institution responsible for executing such a policy. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that this government has absolutely derailed and shaken confidence in the central bank. They tried to intervene in the operations of the bank, forcing the then governor to do something which he knew was wrong and which they ought to have known was illegal. Mr. Speaker, in their misdiagnosis of the forex problem, they sought to sell the narrative that the reason for the forex shortage lay in the distribution of the foreign currency. In so doing, they launched a vicious attack on some of the largest businesses in this country that pay taxes, contribute to revenue, GDP growth, foreign exchange, earnings, and employment. What did they call them? A foreign cartel, a forex cartel. Demonizing the main users of forex in this country. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that we have large conglomerates in this country. We have businesses in the food distribution sector operating supermarket chains. Our food import bill is over $1 billion. Of course, these will be some of the large users of foreign exchange, Mr. Speaker, but this reflects a deeper problem regarding the tastes and preferences of the population. A major part of the forex issue lies in a demand problem, and unless we can curb our appetite for imported goods, especially food, we will continue to face problems like this. Mr. Speaker, this government, in demonizing these businesses, does not only erode business confidence, but also places the central bank, and particularly their governor, in a very difficult position. Mr. Speaker, I quote from the Trinidad Guardian, June 6, 2025, entitled PM, Central Bank Refusing to Divulge Forex Information. Getting back to the topic of the forex cartel, Prime Minister Prasad Bisesa said, the blocker the government is getting from the central bank in its failure to provide information. She said the central bank is using certain provisions of the law saying they don't have a duty and that they are not under any obligation to disclose information. Mr. Speaker, end of quote. The regulations are quite clear on this matter. Section 56 of the Central Bank Act states, and I quote, except insofar as may be necessary for the due performance of its objects, and subject to Section 8 of the Financial Institution Act, every director, officer, and employee of the bank shall preserve and aid in preserving secrecy with regard to all matters relating to the affairs of the bank and financial institutions or persons registered under the Insurance Act or any customers thereof that may come to the knowledge in the course of his duties, unquote. Mr. Speaker, this government was therefore asking the governor of the central bank to do something that was in breach of the law, to disclose the private banking information of top users of foreign exchange. Why did they need this? To demonize our business community? To go on a political platform, as they would say from time to time on Bossama? Mr. Mr. Speaker, this is the law we are speaking about. But more than that, this is a business confidence. This is business interests which was being attacked. As an admission to what the Honourable Prime Minister was asking the central bank governor to do was wrong. The Prime Minister announced that the government will bring legislation to allow for the disclosure of private banking information. Which country in the world does that? Expect confidence. Which country does that and expects confidence in the banking sector to be maintained? Mr. Speaker, the budget statement should have been an opportunity to stabilize the economy, to rebuild confidence, and set a credible plan to restore our foreign exchange position. Instead, what we have been given is an exercise in economic recklessness by a government that has neither the understanding nor competence to manage one of the most delicate systems of our economy. Our foreign exchange framework is like a delicately balanced house of cards. It is not perfect, but it definitely promotes stability. And yet, this government is prepared to collapse those cards without understanding the consequences, not because they have a sound plan, but because it seems their friends and family are whispering in their ears. If you pull the wrong card, Mr. Speaker, then the entire thing will collapse. When it collapses, it will not be the cabinet that suffers. It will be the shopkeeper all over Trinidad and Tobago who cannot pay their suppliers. It will be the manufacturer from Couva to Maclot who can't get materials. It will be families from Diego Martin to Mayaro who suddenly faces soaring prices for basic goods. And yes, there will be people on the streets angry and no doubt seeking answers and solutions. Mr. Speaker, I want the government to know that sound economic management is not public relations, marketing, or populism. It is rooted in facts, research, and a deep understanding of the economic realities which we face as a country. It is not about soundbites or politics. The government's central mistake is that they believe the foreign exchange problem is about allocation. They believe that if they tinkered with who gets forex and when, the problem would be solved. Mr. Speaker, they continue to attack the businesses which form fundamental pillars in our economy. Developing famous terms from time to time, like 1%, forex cartels, they would have you believe that forex allocation was a problem and that some were being favored over others. They misled the population into thinking that all they had to do was to change the way forex was reallocated and the problem will be solved. How quickly they went quiet, and they have since faced the reality. What became all of the talk about forex shortage and unfair allocations? Did the forex suddenly free up in the country? Mr. Speaker, is the problem solved? Of course not. In fact, in the few months of the government's tenure, it has worsened. The government needs to explain the rapid, precipitous decline in net international reserves over US $600 million in their first 5 months of office, and this is after withdrawing over US $200 million from HSF after April 28th. The UNC's mismanagement of our foreign reserves has led to our import cover shrinking to just 5 months by the end of August 2025, the lowest in several decades. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, that during the debate in the mid-year review, the Minister of Finance expressed his feigned shock and dismay at discovering that the PNM government left the country with 7.5 months of import cover. I wonder how the Honourable Minister feels now in less than 6 months. He has caused our import cover to drop to a barely 5 months. Mr. Speaker, the system of allocation is not the disease, it is only a symptom. The disease is our inability to earn foreign exchange at the levels our economy requires, and that ability is tied fundamentally to our energy sector's performance and our capacity to export competitively. Simply, it is an issue of demand and supply. Mr. Speaker, not one single reference was made to the refinery. As a result, we will wait to see if the Prime Minister will make another 180 degrees turn as it relates to issues of the dragon gas. When the People's National Movement demitted office in April, we were at a point where we had a preferred bidder for the Guadalcanal refinery. Mr. Speaker, on the campaign trail, the government promised the people of Trinidad and Tobago that the UNC would reopen the Guadalcanal refinery, yet this Minister of Finance was conspicuously silent last Monday on that issue. They painted the false and fake picture of jobs restored, foreign exchange earned, and prosperity revived. 5 months later, that promise remains only a platform stage. Promise made, promise broken. The PNM government didn't just make promises, they acted. The process to restart the refinery was advanced through a competitive evaluation exercise. After extensive technical and financial assessment, Wando PLC of Nigeria was selected as the preferred bidder to lease and operate the refinery. That represented real progress. A private sector operator was identified. Taxpayers would not bear any cost of restarting the loss-making facility. A framework existed for moving from mothballing to operation in a structured way. The public could see a path forward. What has this government done since coming to office? They scrapped that process, as is their right. Instead of building on the groundwork laid, they appointed a 12-member refinery restart committee in July 2025, and that committee was given 4 months. We are told that the committee will report soon, but Mr. Speaker, the fact is no concrete plan has been presented to the population. We wait to see what the strategy that this committee was given that time to prepare. We wait to see exactly what is that strategy. In fact, even the committee itself admitted to little progress on a restart plan, citing the enormous capital costs of refurbishing the refinery and uncertainty about financial partners. In fact, what we have is a video of the minister in the Ministry of Energy shaking like a leaf as he said, he has the report and refinery is ready to go except for the financial. Mr. Speaker, let me warn this government and point out to the people of this country that given the Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act, the government cannot simply hand over the refinery to any entity without following a proper procurement process. It would be a breach of the provisions of the Procurement Act. We will be monitoring the evolution of this situation closely. I want to remind the people involved that the Procurement Act involves hefty fines and jail terms. So, Mr. Speaker, therefore, the idea of reverting the Exim Bank to simply providing loans and insurance guarantees will be detrimental to our exporters since the facilities to provide them with forex will no longer exist. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to tariffs, the current global environment has made it even more difficult to implement these strategies. Mr. Speaker, whilst this government was firing workers and attacking financial institutions and businesses and undermining independent institutions, they were not doing their jobs. At this time, the US, our largest trading partner, had imposed a 10% reciprocal tariff on exports coming out of this country. This government did nothing to have this tariff removed or negotiated. Or it may be possible that the Honourable Prime Minister in her contribution may indicate to us whether that was a discussion that was held during her visit to the United States. Having done nothing while the rest of the world was feverishly trying to negotiate away these tariffs, the US imposed another round of tariffs and this time went up to 15%. Mr. Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago has been and will be impacted by this new tariff, which will also impact on foreign exchange earnings. Now that the government is scrambling with economic realities, all we hear is political rhetoric, but no solid economic plans and actions. The Minister of Finance is totally out of his depth and will surely lead the country in economic disaster. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister of Finance, in his contribution, indicated that he does not understand that if we run out of foreign exchange, we cannot import, pay our foreign debt, and make simple foreign exchange transfers. Then it would be our job to make him understand where he is taking us. Mr. Speaker, this role will inevitably lead us to harsh realities of potentially defaulting on our foreign debt, which will cause us to default on most of our debt obligations, which will become immediately due for payment as well. Another significant consequence, because we operate a managed floating exchange rate regime, is our reserves are still required to defend the exchange rate of our TT dollar. If we run dangerously low on reserves, we will be unable to maintain our 6.79 rate against the US dollar. You know what would happen, Mr. Speaker. Guess, I suggest. We all know. The Minister of Finance, of course, is smiling because he knows the dreaded D word. Mr. Speaker, we warned the country that given their promises, the UNC threatened to crash the economy and trigger a possible devaluation. It was the only way they could pay for all these promises. How can they manage all that they promised by operating on such diminished revenues? Mr. Speaker, debt and devaluation will be the order of the day, and more this government seems likely to, in the near future, come to this country looking, of course, as usual, to blame the PNM again for forcing their hand to devalue the dollar. But we shall take absolutely no responsibility for this fraudulent and fake budget of this incompetent government. We have nothing to do with this nonsense. We warn, Mr. Speaker, about the irresponsibility of their promises and the expectations they were creating. We specifically warn the country that the only way they can do this would be if they devalue the dollar, almost 10-1. Mr. Speaker, watch them carefully because this is where they are taking us. And remember, we warned you, and we are warning you again. If they continue down this road, we will face a full-blown foreign exchange crisis. It will not be academic. It will not be abstract. It will mean empty shelves, shut businesses, job losses, and a cost of living explosion. When that happens, it will be because this government misdiagnosed the problem, ignored the warnings, and played politics with economic lifeblood of this nation. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the energy sector, which contributes 40 to 45% to our GDP and has traditionally been the largest earner of foreign exchange for Trinidad and Tobago, it is also responsible for approximately 80% of our country's export revenue. It is widely accepted that our country's energy sector is the foundation of our economy, and it has traditionally provided governments with the ability to fund its initiatives. Accordingly, I, like many citizens, was looking to the Minister of Finance budget speech to see what this government's plans and initiatives are for the energy sector. Unfortunately, like many, I'm disappointed but not surprised, as the budget speech said very little about the energy sector and then out of the little that was said, there was not a single new initiative. Not one, Mr. Speaker. Nothing Mr. Speaker, it has become clear and patently obvious to everyone that the government is lost when it comes to the energy sector, but the whole population can see it. The stakeholders must be salivating when preparing to negotiate against this government, as it is obvious that they are unsophisticated out of their depth, and I fear that Trinidad and Tobago will be taken advantage of. Under the heading of what was delivered in the first 150 days in office, the new Minister of Finance stated with much aplomb that we secured landmark energy deals. He then goes on, and quite ashamedly, to claim for the government that they signed the historic agreement with ExxonMobil. Mr. Speaker, it was the former PNM government under the distinguished Minister of Energy at the time, the Honourable Stuart Young, and the Honourable Keith Christopher Rowley, then Prime Minister, that secured the interests of the ExxonMobil for our ultra-deep water block. It was the former PNM government that took a cabinet decision in 2024 to negotiate with ExxonMobil for the ultra-deep water blocks. It was the former PNM government that oversaw the negotiations of the production sharing contract with Exxon. This was all the work of the People's National Movement. It was the first time in Trinidad and Tobago history that the government secured interest in our ultra-deep water acreage. This government turned that work into a signing ceremony and now wishes to claim it as an achievement. But I'm calling on the Honourable Prime Minister to tell this country what are the terms of the production sharing contract. Did you secure a signing bonus? If so, how much was it? If there was none, then why was there none? What are the terms that you claim that you agreed to with Exxon? Is it true that you gave these blocks away? What are the shares of profit for the people of Trinidad and Tobago? The Honourable Minister of Energy and the Honourable Prime Minister must tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago what is the cost recovery, what concessions did the government make. The next landmark energy deal that the new Minister of Finance claimed is that on October 8, 2025, they obtained the Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC license, from the United States Treasury Department to pursue development of gas and Dragon Field. The hollow boast reeks of hypocrisy. The UNC government is absolutely shameless. Mr. Speaker, is this not the same Dragon gas field that the UNC opposition spent 9 years attacking the PNM government about? The government needs to be honest. The work that was done to secure the Dragon gas deal was done by the People's National Movement. It was the PNM in December 2023 that secured and delivered a 30-year exploration and production license from the government of the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela to develop the Dragon field and to export gas to Trinidad and Tobago. It was the UNC opposition that did everything possible to try and scuttle that deal. It was the UNC, in an unpatriotic manner, called for the former Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, and the Honourable Member of Parliament, Stuart Young, for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West to be sanctioned by the US state government. Mr. Speaker, hypocrites. The number of times that we sat in this parliament over the past 9 years and heard the UNC attack the Dragon and attack us for pursuing the gas from the Dragon. Well, I want to remind the population today that the gas belongs to Venezuela, and I want to ask the Honourable Prime Minister what what does she recognize, or who does she recognize as the president of Venezuela? It was the PNM government that acknowledged the need to try and secure gas from an alternative source. It was the PNM that identified the Dragon gas field and negotiated with Shell, with the government of Venezuela and the government of the United States to secure and pursue this. And the UNC will not be allowed to pretend that they have the ability and foresight to secure Dragon. Mr. Speaker, let me make it abundantly clear. We on this side want Dragon gas for Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Speaker, it was the Honorable Prime Minister who, on her assumption of office, immediately said and boasted, the Dragon is dead. It was the Honorable Prime Minister who said that they will get gas from Grenada, Guyana, and Suriname. They then rushed off after being rejected by Guyana.
Chased away. They were chased away.
And that there are no proven gas reserves in Grenada, and being out of depth in Suriname, and ended right back to Dragon. Today, the question Trinidad and Tobago has for the Prime Minister is, what do you promise in exchange for the 6-month provisional OFAC license?
Tell us.
Mr. Speaker, every single energy project that the Minister of Finance mentions in his budget speech that is holding our gas production steady at 2.7 BCF per day is the work of the former PNM administration. Mentos PNM, SIP PNM, Parenco taking over Woodside and BPTT shallow water assets PNM. The deep water bid round they want to claim is a success was started and opened and launched by the PNM. We wait to see if they manage to award any blocks, and if so, on what terms, as they are notorious for giving Trinidad and Tobago away cheaply at a loss. Even the restarting of the steel production, the Minister of Finance wants to try and claim was started, negotiated, and done by the PNM. Shamelessly, the UNC is trying to claim progress in the solar energy sector. A 92.2 megawatt Brechin Castle solar project is again all the work of the PNM. It was the PNM that secured the deal, negotiated the deal, and began construction of the largest solar power plant in the Caribbean. The green hydrogen they want to claim is also work of the PNM. It was the PNM cabinet that took the decision and approved the building of a green hydrogen facility in Trinidad and Tobago, and all the wind-generated projects that they are claiming are the policy and decisions of the People's National Government. Mr. Speaker, there is not a single energy project that is commenced by this Minister of Energy, who unfortunately was not invited to attend with the Honourable Minister when discussions were held, historic discussions were held by the Honourable Prime Minister and the Secretary of State.
Uninvited guests.
But I took note of the fact that the Honourable Minister of Energy has indicated that he would be going to Venezuela to continue the
By a boat.
Mr. Speaker,
A fishing
the
boat.
National Gas Company, and of course, Mr.
Go by a
Speaker,
fishing boat.
we on this side wish the Honourable Minister well in those negotiations.
That's right.
Mr. Speaker, the National Gas Company is critical to the energy economy of this country. It engages in midstream transmission of gas from upstream to downstream and is the centerpiece of all elements of our gas sector. But under the UNC, Mr. Speaker, the NGC has been highly politicized and utilized almost like a piggy bank to be smashed and raided and utilized for political purposes. You may recall, Mr. Speaker, in the period 2010 to 2015, this vital and highly profitable state enterprise held some 16 billion in cash balances. Over that period, every single cent was drained, extracted through special dividends and spent at that time by the UNC government. Mr. Speaker, this was equivalent to 10% of the GDP at the time, an amount larger than this year's already massive fiscal deficit emptied from the NGC. To be spent on what? The highly dubious and overpriced Betham wastewater treatment plant, costing over $1 billion, which was a total waste and squandering of taxpayers' funds. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the Honourable House, this was the fraudulent UNC government that used 700 million of taxpayers' money while the owner of SIS fled to Panama after the UNC lost the elections in 2015. Under the PNM, NGC fought SIS in an arbitration and won, and the government and the chairman of NGC have refused to tell the population what the decision of the arbitration was. I call on the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Energy to tell us, did NGC win the Betham wastewater arbitration, and does SIS have to pay NGC over $350 million, and what is the government and NGC doing to collect the said money? Mr. Speaker, I now wish to raise some matters as it relates to social development. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of People and Social Development is the conscience of the state. What is being presented to the country is an innovation, is in fact a systematic weakening of the institution that safeguard the poor, elderly, and vulnerable. It is important to remind the nation that the solid foundation of this ministry was laid by the People's National Movement. It was under the PNM that a comprehensive partnership was forged with the World Bank to assess and modernize the country's entire social protection system. That work produced a detailed framework for reform focused on accountability, data integrity, and efficiency. The system, policies, and digitization projects that the current administration boasts about were conceived and built and implemented by the PNM leadership. The present government has therefore inherited those efforts, rebranded them, and now parades them as their own. Adding to this dysfunction is the creation of the National Payment and Innovation Company of Trinidad and Tobago. It has been promoted as a new digital mechanism for government transactions, but in practice, it centralizes control of social grants payment under the Ministry of Finance. This move strips the Social Development Ministry of its operational independence and places the welfare of citizens under political management. It is a consideration of power disguised as modernization, one that risks turning social assistance into a political tool. This is the broader truth of the budget before us. It is not about empowering people. It is about controlling them. It is not about continuity. It is about dismantling what is. When the PNM was in office, the Ministry of Social Development operated with accountability, purpose, and humanity. In the budget, the UNC tried to take credit for the work already completed by the PNM, another example of a fake and fraudulent budget. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to housing, the government has signaled that its target is 20,000 houses in 2 years, using public-private partnerships and innovative mechanism. This objective is a carbon copy of the PNM's Vision 2030. The UNC is shameless and bereft of ideas, stealing without imagination. The objective in the way in which they have submitted is unachievable for the following reasons. Based on the Based on the Honourable Minister's statement during his budget contribution, there is a lack of availability of suitable lands, there is a reluctance by banks and contractors to engage in a genuine PPP, and there is a lack of suitable contractors for the skill and know-how to carry out such a program. The use of the PPP to achieve this target is flawed. Affordable housing does not provide large margins of profit and hence would not generate the rate of return to appeal to investors and financial institutions. To redress this is likely to be the state supplementing the shortfall. In addition, PPPs are notorious for the private partner defaulting and the government having to acquire the debt. The entire allocation for the Ministry of Housing is 668 million, with 200 million earmarked for the HDC. Mr. Speaker, I'd now like to turn to the sporting sector. The sporting sector has been left visionless, untouched, and directionless under this UNC government. Again, the Minister of Finance took credit for the work of the PNM. The government has no plan for sport and youth, no plan, no new programs, and no plan for the development of youth. Mr. Speaker, why do I say so? If it is that youth and sport was a priority for this government, then it would not have been a case where precious little would have been said about it in the budget. Mr. Speaker, PNM government would have expanded our partnership with the G.C. Foster College of Jamaica, enhanced the utilization of the elite athlete program facilities, and expanded the July-August vacation program and the extension of the community cricket program. This, plus many other sporting programs, were all started under the People's National Anthem. Mr. Speaker, they are also telling us that notwithstanding the fact that the Honourable Minister of Sport has been in office for 5 months, that he has not been able to meet the stakeholders. We are waiting patiently for the Minister's contribution to get an indication as to what is this situation. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about the major sporting bodies in the country, and the first fundamental duty of the Minister has not been completed. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to youth, this budget has tragically gutted the youth agenda in our development program. Under the PNM, we created the Ministry of Youth Development to specifically promote holistic youth development by producing over 50 youth-centered policies. And programs for the largest demographic in the country. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance has said little or nothing on youth development simply because the budget is bereft of any real youth development initiative. Half a page with nothing of substance was dedicated to youth in their public sector investment program. Mr. Speaker, we allocated 50 million to the development for youth in the last fiscal year, while they have proposed a measly 10 million, and 8 million of which is to repair indoor arenas and the rest for IT services. In summary, Mr. Speaker, the youth of this nation have received $0 for their development. Mr. Speaker, when a new member of Lauketa won, the young people of Trinidad and Tobago lost everything. I implore the young people to take notice. Mr. Speaker, I would now like to turn to the allocation of local government. Local government is critical to the development and maintenance of our major cities, boroughs, towns, and villages. Local government accounts for more than 80% of our roadway, drainage, systems, and streets, and primarily acts as the first responder to disasters in our communities. Mr. Speaker, what we have seen by this government in relation to local government is political victimization coupled with regressive policies crowned with a lack of vision. Mr. Speaker, the PNM-led corporations which account for more than 50% of the population, saw drastic reductions in their recurrent and development plans allocations. However, the UNC corporations received a greater share for themselves. This is very draconian, discriminative, and very vindictive. I, Mr. Speaker, will give a few examples. The 2026 Development Programme allocation for the borough of Arima has been cut by 12.6 million when compared to 2025. The development programme for the allocation of the borough of Diego Martin has been cut by 6.3 million. The development programme of the Port of Spain City Corporation has been cut by 15.6 million, and so on. Every single PNM corporation has had its 2026 development programme allocation drastically reduced. But when we look at the UNC corporations, Chaguanas, Princeton, Pinal Debe have seen huge increases in their 2026 allocations in excess of 20 million, making their development program allocations for 2026 more than 6 times as large as the PNM corporations. Imagine the development program allocation for Princeton Corporation is now twice as large as the allocation for the capital city and the second city, San Fernando. Mr. Speaker, to compound this inexplicable and cruel allocation, they have failed to release money for the PNM controlled corporations for the development program, which includes money for the repair and clearing of roads and drains. Mr. Speaker, it is utterly disappointing to see a minister who has once served at the helm of local government allow this administration to stymie the ability of some corporations to provide for the basic needs of their communities. The PNM must be credited as the only government that has been serious on the policy of local government reform, allowing for greater autonomy in law, executive management, and increased resources for our communities to advance real and progressive development. Mr. Speaker, the agriculture sector that this UNC government inherited in April 2025 was rebuilt, modernized, and strengthened through a decade of structured investment and innovation under the stewardship of the PNM and the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. When the PNM assumed office in 2015, agriculture was on the decline, plagued by poor infrastructure, lack of access roads, and weak institutional support. By 2025, through deliberate policy and partnership, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries delivered tangible, measurable results across all public sectors. The 2026 budget conveniently rebrands these achievements by calling them, Mr. Speaker, new plans, while failing to acknowledge the existing framework that made them possible. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture spoke of a 3-year priority commodities program for 15 high-demand products with annual focus on 3 crops and 1 livestock category as if they were new areas of focus. I want to remind the Honourable Minister, the truth is that these initiatives were launched and implemented under the People's National Congress. Mr. Speaker, as a matter of fact, on May 18, 2025, 3 weeks into this government tenure, they executed a PNM policy by distributing an additional 100 tons of high-quality rice seeds procured from Guyana under the same Memorandum of Agreement arrangements for the 2025 rice growing season. Not at least even willing to give the People's National Movement, not even 1% vote. The seeds are expected to support the commercial planting of approximately 2,000 acres of land across Trinidad and Tobago. This strategic intervention was part of the PNM government commitment to reducing the National Food Import Bill, improving local agricultural resilience, and increasing rice self-sufficiency. Again, Mr. Speaker, sound PNM policy. Mr. Speaker, the 2026 budget's promise new agricultural roads and irrigation project mirrors exactly what the PNM completed over the last decade. These works build the foundation for food security and rural economic growth. Yes, this administration now speaks of starting where the PNM already succeeded. The budget claims of regularizing farmers and granting leases again rest on groundwork completed under the PNM. In addition, while the 2026 budget highlights digital transformation, the records show that it was the PNM government that modernized the sector. Fully digitalization of the import permitting via TT-Biz links, Grow Trinbago platform, drone mapping, and LIDR surveys for land management, digitalization of all state land paper records, online farmer training via Moodle and youth-focused 4-H programs reaching over 33,000 participants in 10 years. Under the PNM, agro-processing was greatly expanding. In fact, under the PNM, the Moruga Agro-Processing and Light Industrial Park was opened in 2020. NAMDEFCO's e-market platform and farmers' market expansion strengthened farm-to-market linkages and increased monthly consumer reach to over 21,000 shoppers. Mr. Speaker, the Minister reported in agriculture, India donated agro-processing machinery valued at US $1 million to NAMDEFCO and extended technical support for natural farming systems. Mr. Speaker, what he didn't say is the India-Trinidad and Tobago collaboration for the provision of grant funding of $1 million US agro-processing equipment designated for NAMDEFCO was negotiated by the PNM administration. These negotiations began in June 2023. These are the kinds of structural transformations that the UNC now attempts to claim as new projects under their government. Mr. Speaker, the PNM ensured access to agricultural credit through the ADB, approving over $1 billion in loans. Mr. Speaker, as agro-processing, aquaculture, hydroponics, aeroponic, indoor farming, and poultry production are categorized as commercial customers, they will now experience a rise in their cost of production since the government proposes the introduction of an electricity surcharge as a targeted fiscal measure. This could lead to increased prices for consumer agricultural products. Mr. Speaker, the full implementation of the tax-free concessions for the agricultural sector is PNM policy, and all steps were initiated already to review the various pieces of legislation that cause ambiguity in the system. It must also be noted that the most agricultural machinery and equipment are already free of VAT and duties, and existing provisions provide for farmers to apply to the Ministry of Agriculture on a case-by-case basis for duty-free concessions and relief on any input they wish to procure for their operations. Provisions were also made under the existing agricultural incentive program for rebates of up to 50% of the cost of many inputs for various subsectors in agriculture. Mr. Speaker, going further, it was sound PNM policy that led to an additional line item for funding at the Ministry of Finance for agro-incentive grant funding of up to $100,000 per person or entities wishing to upgrade their farms into climate-smart systems, move primary productions to agro-processing, and add value to their operations. This government came in, met checks prepared by the Ministry of Agriculture, and blatantly refused to distribute them, allowing those checks to go stale-dated. Most of the farmers affected are, in many instances, their own constituents, and certainly be the judges of their actions. Mr. Speaker, in relation to tourism, this budget failed to sustain and continue policies already in place, failed to maintain investor confidence, and has failed to articulate its vision for the tourism industry. This budget offers only empty slogans, ambiguity, and vagueness. Mr. Speaker, this government inherited the foundation of a tourism sector positioned for takeoff. What we expected and what the country deserved was a budget that would consolidate and build upon that momentum. Instead, what we have is a document full of re-announcement, contradictions, and vague plans. Mr. Speaker, the Minister declares that tourism remains a high-growth sector and lists accommodation projects such as 4 Points, Hampton Inn, Maracas Bay and Tobago Marriott, and the Elephant Tree Resorts. He conveniently omitted, hopefully not by accident, to mention the already approved 125 Hilton Garden Inn, the planned operationalization of the Napa Hotel, where a hotel operator was already chosen. While these projects are expected to bring jobs and economic generation, they are not new, as they were already on the way. Mr. Speaker, they were in opposition for almost 10 years, and for the 10 years, they claim to have all the answer. Yet today, in their first budget statement, there are no new initiatives, no policy direction, no capital allocation to support Trinidad and Tobago to tourism's diversification. Mr. Speaker, the government speaks of tourism as a high-growth sector, but the fiscal measures announced by the Minister of Finance will achieve the exact opposite. The budget introduced new taxes, surcharges, and fee increases that will undoubtedly drive operating costs for hotels, for restaurants, tour operators, and every small business connected with tourism. What this government has done under the guise of broadening the tax base is to broaden the burden, placing it squarely on the backs of those who are trying to grow the non-energy sector. Mr. Speaker, you cannot speak about diversifying the economy on the one hand and then impose higher costs of doing business on the other. You cannot declare tourism as a high-growth sector while simultaneously draining its livelihood through higher operating expenses. This budget punishes participation in tourism rather than encouraging it. How can you speak about Tobago competitive while increasing the operating costs of every hotel and guest house on the island? Mr. Speaker, the Minister proudly announced that the A&R Robinson Airport will be fully operational in the second quarter of 2026, which is 9 months after the date that the PNM has scheduled for the said operationalization. Let us be clear, this project was virtually complete before the UNC government took office. Further, an airport terminal is simply infrastructure. What is needed is a complete tourism ecosystem, such as what was planned and envisioned by the PNM government with international flagship hotels, airline partnerships, and world-class marinas. While the new minister spoke about the airport, he said nothing about airlines. There were no mention of Caribbean Airlines and its strategic routes, no mention of new partnerships, no plan for increased airlift, no destination marketing, no route incentives, and no international promotion of Tobago as a world-class destination. Equally troubling, the minister announced no initiative to attract a new international flagship hotel since they chased away Sandals, those global brands and anchor destinations, and create a pull factor for airlift. Mr. Speaker, it is astonishing that the word cruise ship does not appear anywhere in this budget statement. The cruise industry, which has brought thousands of visitors and millions of foreign exchange, is now being completely ignored. The sector faces serious challenges due to the International Maritime Organization's net zero framework, which compels cruise lines to reduce their carbon footprint and shorten itineraries. As a result, many now operate 5-day cruises that exclude Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Speaker, we wait patiently to hear what is the government's policy to address this particular issue. The new reality jeopardizes tourism jobs, foreign exchange earnings, and our cruise sector. Yet, there is no mention in the incentives to attract cruise liners, no intent to negotiate, and no plan to mitigate the effects of this shift. While the other Caribbean countries are adapting to remain relevant and competitive, the government has chosen to remain silent. The budget boldly claims that the marine and yachting sector will attract some US $3 billion in 2 years and US $9 billion in 5. Yet, the minister provided no policy, no plan, no feasibility study, no legislative framework, and no PPP agreement. These are not projections, they are fantasies in this fake and fraudulent budget. Mr. Speaker, the minister also spoke of an orange economy and the creation of a carnival city, but no details. Where is this to be located? How will it operate given the government's policy to limit noise in urban areas? What will happen to this sector in the huge increase in the price of alcoholic beverages? Where is the funding and business plan? Cultural tourism requires investment in people and experience, not vague declaration. Mr. Speaker, our creative industries are living assets. They need structure and support, not speeches. Mr. Speaker, having listened to the minister, that is the most I heard during his contribution as it relates to culture. We know that culture is the heart and soul of Trinidad and Tobago, yet absolutely no plans and projects were submitted by the Honourable Minister as it relates to this area. Mr. Speaker, I would now like to turn to Tobago. Mr. Speaker, like most Tobagonians, I welcome any increase in allocation to Tobago. We on this side will never oppose more for Tobago. However, we will always insist on truth for Tobago. Mr. Speaker, what is being sold to the public is a record spend of over $3.7 billion, made up of 5% of the budget allocation and an additional $763 million in the central government expenditure is quite frankly deceitful, deceptive, and dishonest. Mr. Speaker, the government has blurred the lines between two very different types of expenditure. Direct THA allocations, which the Assembly can actually use to manage Tobago affairs, and central government expenditures in Tobago, such as oil spill response payments, WASA upgrades, TNTech works, and other national programs. These, Mr. Speaker, are not the same. Mr. Speaker, central government projects in Tobago cannot be substituted for the THA's development funds. They do not build Tobago's autonomy, nor do they expand the Assembly's fiscal authority. Mr. Speaker, it was the People's National Movement, both in Trinidad and Tobago, that voted to guarantee Tobago a minimum of 6.8% through the Tobago Island. It was the UNC, aided and abetted by their ally in Tobago, the current Chief Secretary, who derailed and rejected that constitutional amendment. Mr. Speaker, the result is that instead of receiving 6.8%, roughly $4 billion, Tobago is now getting only 5%, $2.96 billion. So let the record show. The UNC did not give Tobago $1 billion more. They cost Tobago $1 billion less. Mr. Mr. Speaker, this is not the highest percentage the THA has ever received. In 2018, under the PNM administration, Tobago combined allocation, including both direct THA funding and central government spend, represented approximately 6.4% of the national budget. So what is being implemented, trumpeted today as historic, is in truth a record-breaking spin. When UNC spins, everybody spins. Mr. Speaker, the development allocation which funds Tobago's road construction investment actually decreased by 4.5 million from the 205 million to 201.4 million. Mr. Speaker, and this government will have you believe that the People's National Movement over the years has not supported projects and plans for Tobago. Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that with the partnership of the Tobago House of Assembly, a People's National Movement assisted in the acquisition of Cove Estate and its establishment as an eco-industrial hub for economic diversification. The landing of a 1 billion natural gas pipeline and natural gas processing facilities in collaboration with the natural gas company done by the People's National Movement. The construction of a dual-powered electricity generation plant at Cove. The designation of the Cove Industrial Estate Park as a special economic zone with a view towards accelerating the transformation and diversification of the Tobago economy. Financial support for the acquisition and expansion of the Assembly's land bank. Construction of the Scarborough and Roxborough hospitals. Construction of the Roxborough and Sherburne police station. Construction of the Roxborough fire station. Construction of the Speyside Secondary, Mason Hall and Goodwood High Schools. Introduction of the Inter-Island Fast Ferry Service and the recent acquisition of 3 new fast ferries, APT James, the Boca Reef, and the Galleons Passage, resulting in the potential growth of the Tobago economy by 25% or 500 million, providing valuable foreign exchange, create direct employment for approximately 1,400 persons. So, Mr. Speaker, let me make it abundantly clear. I want to state emphatically that the opposition is in full support of sustainable tourism development in Tobago. We support the construction of complementary infrastructure in the tourism sector in Tobago, such as a marina, and we are also in support of the Rocky Point Marriott Hotel Development Project, which commenced through the joint efforts of the previous THA administration and the central government. We hope that the current government will reconsider their policy stance on tourism investment in Tobago, given that the leaders of the UNC and the PDP took full responsibility for throwing the Sandals projects out. So, Mr. Speaker, let me make it abundantly clear that the Tobagonians are not asking for any favors, they are asking for value. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that when we look at URP and CPEP, 2 programs that sustain hundreds of Tobago households, we cannot find any clear allocation. So I ask, is it that CPEP and URP will be shut down in Tobago after the next THA election, just as they are being dismantled in Trinidad? Mr. Speaker, since 2021, the THA administration has received over 11 billion, averaging 2.7 billion per year, more than any administration in the history of the Assembly. Yet our people are asking what has improved under their lives. My information is that over 300 million in development spend has been awarded to contractors outside of Tobago for works that were done in Tobago. The economic effects is devastating. Tobago contractors who previously executed these services now face cash flow crises, and banks are moving to foreclose on long-standing local foods. Mr. Speaker, tourism should be Tobago's economic engine, yet we see real signs of collapse. According to the Tobago Hotel and Tourism Association, international tourist arrivals have dropped, Mr. Speaker, by some 70%, with only 24,500 foreign visitors recorded last year. This decline, confirmed by the THTA President in August 2025, represents an economic and social crisis for the island. Mr. Speaker, we should also be honest about investments in Tobago. The PNM initiated both the Marriott and the Elephant Tree projects. After spending over $25 million on overseas travel, what new bankable investment has the THA secured? To those who once ran sandals out of Tobago to the IC, as the region embraces similar models, look at St. Vincent, see the opportunities that they have chased away. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the greatest insult of this budget is the complete silence on Tobago's autonomy. It is clear that the UNC's name is a misnomer. Mr. Speaker, there is no national in the United National Congress, and soon there will be no united. How could you be a national party and say not one word, not one line, and not one promise in a budget about the autonomy for Tobago? The Chief Secretary, who once declared Tobago's autonomy his life's mission, who led marches and accused others of betrayal, was ignored by this Congress. Mr. Speaker, I'd now like to address some issues as it relates to national security. Mr. Speaker, the budget statement was eerily silent about the crime and criminality. The visionless government did not present any workable anti-crime plan, but boasted that murders were done. Another fraudulent and false statement. In the face of 10 murders in a 24-hour period, and all within a state of emergency. Since my appointment as leader of the opposition, I gave the country an undertaking that this People's National Movement will do, as it has always done in the national interest, cooperate with the government on all initiatives and legislation that will advance the national good of the country. Crime and criminality have been in this country's Achilles heel for decades. From legislative interventions and social programs, criminal justice, and policy reforms, the challenge remains pervasive and the landscape remains fluid. A sustained national effort is the only way to fight this menace, and the petty blame game will take us nowhere very fast. As a matter of fact, we have seen political obstructionist behavior by the UNC when the PNM brought legislation to reform our justice system and to give law enforcement the upper hand in the fight against crime. Today, many of key spokespersons in the government speak with a level of brazen hypocrisy on this matter that even the criminals probably hold their heads in astonishment. The UNC has played petty politics with crime and on many occasions has refused to cooperate with the previous PNM governments in our efforts. From the cancellation of the purchase of the offshore patrol vessels to protect our national borders, the dismantling of the special anti-crime unit, the misuse and abuse of the assets of national security, the appointment of a telephone operator to lead the country's premier national intelligence agency, the dismantling of the country's facial recognition system are just a few examples of political misbehavior and wickedness that work towards protecting criminals and giving them the upper hand to wreak havoc on our citizens. The country country must never forget that it was the Honorable Prime Minister who once said, "The war against the criminals is not the war on the seas, but is on the streets." To justify her government's reckless and irresponsible cancellation of a contract for the purchase of high-powered and high-speed naval vessels to protect and secure our nation's porous borders. We must ask ourselves the sobering question: how many lives this has cost the people of Trinidad and our esteemed Caribbean neighbors. In case citizens are asking why they need to remind the country about this, it is because our circumstances today are as direct results of uncooperative, undermining, and destructive politics, practiced by many in the past 15 years who now sit in the government and who today are still on the stage pretending that they are now the champions and defenders of the people against the scourge of crime. Mr. Speaker, fast forward to today. Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to officially welcome you and to say that we are very pleased that you have the opportunity to preside. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, fast forward to today. Since assuming office in April 29th, the government and its ministers, Homeland Security and Defense, have not articulated anything that inspires confidence. As a matter of fact, their presence and utterances in this government has caused more to fear and consternation in the national psyche than crime itself. Within a state of emergency called by this government to address a specific national threat, this is the present state of affairs. Approximately 230 murders since this government assumed office. Approximately 85 committed since the state of emergency was declared. 30 murders already recorded in the month of October. Removal of the prisons commissioner from his position. Sending the commanding officer of the regiment on leave and rescinding this decision within 48 hours. Termination of the appointment of the Chief of Defense Staff. Minister of Homeland Security in a recent passing out parade at the Police Academy pleading with senior executive to stop infighting. To add insult to injury, this unpatriotic government cancelled our National Independence Day parade because of a fear of attack by criminal elements. However, several ministers have been seen in very public spaces without fear of criminals. The nation remains in the dark as to whether these threats were credible. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is clear to the national community that the UNC has once again fooled the population. Madam Deputy Speaker, they have no obvious plans to tackle crime from its root causes and are unable to demonstrate that it will do so differently from the previous PNM government. Madam Deputy Speaker, so far, what the country has gotten from the ministers in charge of national security is nothing but astonishing, bizarre examples, calling for the trying of child offenders as adults, asking for the public to be patient, advising that attorneys stop drinking milk from their clients. Invoking Standing Orders 27-1 to evade answering questions on serious national security issues. All they can offer us is plastic bags of hot air. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are certainly frightening times and the road ahead will be bumpy and rough. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd now like to turn to public utilities. The Honourable Minister of Finance boldly mentioned and boast about projects completed during the UNC's 5 months in office in the water sector. Madam Deputy Speaker, as Minister of Planning and Development in the last PNM government, I worked closely with my colleague, the then Honourable Marvin Gonzalez, Minister of Public Utilities and Member of Parliament for Aruka Lopino in the transformation agenda for the water and sewage sector. As part of this transformation roadmap, we secured funding from the Ministry of Finance through the development programs and the Inter-American Development Bank for a suite of projects that saw water flowing in communities for the first time. Madam Deputy Speaker, the People's National Movement was successful in completing over 400 small, medium and large projects that brought relief to many rural communities through the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. Over 600,000 people experienced an improvement in their water supply, and no amount of UNC misinformation will erase our stellar achievement in the water sector. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are aware that there is still work to be done in the water sector, but the foundation has been laid. I urge the government to continue the work that was done and the plans and programs put in place by technocrats and professionals that place Trinidad and Tobago on the path towards achieving water security for all. Madam Deputy Speaker, those of us who were in this Parliament in the year 2000 would recall that the then UNC government said that there would be water for all by the year 2000. Projects that started, and I could name a few: Guanapo, North Oropouche, Carapal, Freeport, Goldsboro, Santa Cruz, and the Chatham water treatment plants. These projects started under a visionary PNM government will bring relief to the citizens, and we expect to hear that this UNC government will carry through with them for the good of all. The undermining and demonizing of the transformation agenda for narrow political gains has already reversed years of hard work by true patriots in the sector, and the country has already started paying the political price. Mr. Speaker, no amount of press releases to fool the people will bring about water relief. It was hard work, fairness, and a commitment by the PNM to take on difficult decisions and undertakings will secure our water future. Madam Deputy Speaker, although the budget was silent on climate change and any matters relating to the environment, its impact on the water surface and groundwater resources is already bearing down on our citizens, and the government has said nothing that points towards a direction that inspires hope. Madam Deputy Speaker, the announced electricity rate increase for commercial and industrial customers came like a shock to many customers. This is the same government that campaigned and promised that there will be no electricity rate increase in Trinidad and Tobago. And in August this year, the Minister of Public Utility boasted that the government has rejected the last RIC report, which was submitted to the last PNM cabinet and was under consideration. The PNM government gave no undertaking save to say that whatever decision may be taken, the poor and the vulnerable will be insulated. Madam Deputy Speaker, in true UNC fashion, the country got a 6 for a 9, with massive increases in the price of electricity, with these increases to be borne by all consumers in our supermarkets, small businesses, hair salons, shops, malls, and variety stores. The government has failed to put in place systems or policies to safeguard the poor and vulnerable in societies against these shocks. Yet another example of a fake and fraudulent budget. As it relates to education, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, my apologies. Under the People's National Movement, education stood as a pillar of employment and opportunity. We invested in our students, protected the vulnerable, and built a system that worked for every child. Under this government, that legacy has been destroyed. Our education system has been gutted, neglected, and left visionless. Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget exposes a government without compassion, without foresight, and without a plan for the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. Under the PNM, no child was left behind. We funded the remedial education program, the book grant, and the school feeding program. Under the UNC, those very programs have been cut. The remedial education program was reduced by $4.4 million. The book grant was completely removed, leaving 20,000 students without help. The school feeding program was cut by $10 million. And for the first time in years, no vacation revision program was held to help the struggling SEA students.
Shame.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not policy, this is punishment.
Wickedness.
Under the PNM, we provided consistent funding for primary, secondary, and special schools. Under this government, there have been no increases, only deception. The minister boasted that 13 partner schools received $11 million in support, pretending it was a new initiative. However, that same amount was allocated under the People's National Movement in 2024. Once again, the UNC has taken PNM projects, rebranded them, and claimed them as their own. When we look at the school repairs, the picture is even worse. Under the PNM, $98 million was spent on repairing and upgrading schools. Under this government, they were given $192 million and spent only 26, less than 15%. Then even received an additional $83 million in the mid-year and still failed to use it. Madam Deputy Speaker, schools had to turn to the regional corporations for help to reopen. One school was forced into a shift system because there was no furniture even after the Ministry of Education delayed opening by a week. This, Madam Deputy Speaker, is incompetence and failure. Madam Deputy Speaker, under the PNM, we modernized education with e-classroom project and the Educational Technology Unit, bringing digital learning to life. Under this UN, you will speak during your time, don't worry. Under this UNC government, that project was simply renamed Next Class and presented as something new. The UNC recycles PNM achievements and pretends it is their innovation. In the youth sector, the pattern continues. New funding was cut by $45 million. That's right. There are no new programs at UTT, NESC, National Training Agency, Accreditation Council, YTEP, or MIC. The provision for contract employment across both ministries of education and tertiary education was reduced by $30 million, putting the jobs of hundreds of professionals at risk. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government has not only cut funding, but it has also cut hope. Under the PNM, we built educational opportunities. Under the UNC government, they built excuses. They have dismantled what worked, silenced what mattered, and betrayed the young people of this country. This budget is not about building a nation, it is about breaking one. It is a budget of broken promises, misplaced priorities, and fake deliveries. Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget was empty on substance, short on delivery, and I maintain false and fraudulent. Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish now to address some issues as it relates to sales tax. The only new source of revenue suggested by this government is the sales tax, which is intended, they say, to replace VAT. However, this new dispensation will take a minimum of 5 years to be fully implemented, and not a cent of revenue will be derived in this financial year. Madam Deputy Speaker, I now want to deal with some issues relating to wage negotiations. I noticed, and I think the whole country noticed, that the PSA is celebrating what they perceive to be a done deal with an increase of 10% of their salary. However, while they celebrate, it's interesting to note that nowhere, absolutely nowhere, in the estimates of expenditure can the allocation for the back pay of $5 billion for an increase in annual recurrent expenditure of over $500 million, which is just for the civil service. Absolutely nowhere can it be found. It's not there. Did they forget? Was it $1 billion oversight? And what about the other workers, the other trade unions? Will they also get a 10% increase? Or is the UNC playing favorites? If they deprive the other trade unions of a similar 10% increase, which they simply cannot finance without devaluing the dollar, they will create massive unrest. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister, as it relates to contract employment, outlined a policy of transition of fixed-term contracts to the permanent establishment, but let slip that only 40% of existing contract positions are targeted for this transition. Apart from the fact that creating permanent positions on the civil service establishment is a complex undertaking that can take years to complete, what will happen, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the other 60% of contract workers? Will they be terminated and sent home? This will be another 10,000 workers who can lose their jobs. In this context, I say to workers, watch out. Your contract positions will now be filled. Of course, as they said, when UNC wins, everybody wins. But just wait to see, yes, just wait to see who will fill those positions. Whether it be friend or family. Because we know very well, we just have to look. On the one hand, they tell us that CPEP and URP has been closed. But yet still, we know that they have already hired certain persons to management positions in those programs. So let us wait and see, because the evidence is going to be made public, whether in truth and in fact, those URP programs have really been closed. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd now like to talk about the development program. The development program, or PSIP, is estimated at $4.1 billion, or 6% of total expenditure. Is it enough? Can all those promises be fulfilled? Will the population be given full disclosure on the areas of new revenue streams, as bandied about boastfully during the election campaign? What are these new revenue streams? Are they part of the development program? Are they part of the recurrent expenditure? Or are they a figment of somebody's fertile imagination? While destroying the TTRA, no mention was made of any new significant streams. As we all know, Madam Deputy Speaker, the PSIP is designed to promote growth, to generate employment, and of course to attract investment. No mention of how the PSIP will be used. Madam Deputy Speaker, and I therefore want to return to certain matters as it relates to URP and CPEP. And I want to say that after mistreating and brutalizing the CPEP and URP workers for months, the Minister of Finance on Monday finally killed those programs and indicated that the Prime Minister will perform the final rites. This is the ultimate betrayal of workers who have been told that they would be getting back their jobs in a short space of time. As a matter of fact, on the one hand, they spoke about an audit, and on the other hand, they spoke about opening a new company, Now I hope that the CPEP and URP workers are very clear what was always the intention of this government. These workers who the government put on the breadline with an expectation that this would be temporary have found out that there is no prospect of being rehired. Another fake and fraudulent promise. What therefore is their consolation? An unemployment fund, and I must ask, where will this fund reside and who will administer it? Will we now see the political patronage in exchange for employment? Who will workers now have to grovel in order to gain employment to this fund? Another plan to suit their UNC friends and family? We wait patiently. As it relates, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the issue of revenue, this Minister of Finance predicated the budget on an oil price of $73.25 per barrel and oil and US 4.25 per MMBTU for natural gas. He has severely overestimated the energy prices on which this budget is based, therefore overestimating his revenue and severely underestimating the deficit. Madam Deputy Speaker, as I speak yesterday, West Texas Intermediate Oil Price, a benchmark used by Trinidad and Tobago for decades, was just over $57 per barrel. Shockingly, the U.S. Energy Information Administration, a source used by the Ministry of Finance for decades, for its forecast is currently estimating a WTI price of US $48.50 per barrel in 2026. This is almost US $25 below the minister's estimate of 73.25, indicating that the minister has grossly and probably deliberately overestimated the price of oil in 2026 in order to inflate his estimate of revenues from petroleum, thereby giving himself the ability to withdraw funds from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund when his bogus oil prices is demonstrated to be false. Fitch Ratings, another source used by the Ministry of Finance, in recent years, just last month, lowered its oil price forecast to $60 per barrel based on the increasing global oversupply of oil. When we expose the ridiculous oil price estimate quoted by the minister on Monday, one of his inexperienced but talkative colleagues claimed that the UNC had looked at various scenarios, but optimistic and pessimistic, to arrive at the dubious 73.25 oil price for 2026. Madam Deputy Speaker, the International Monetary Fund is similarly forecasting oil price below $60 a barrel for Brent oil in 2026, and oil from Trinidad and Tobago fetches much lower prices than Brent on international markets. The World Bank is also estimating similar declines. In an effort to avoid any form of doubt, there is no credible source in the world that is currently predicting an oil price above $60 per barrel of oil in 2026. That 73.25 price was pulled out of a hat and is as fake and fraudulent as the rest of the budget and only has one purpose: that is to falsely inflate the estimates of energy revenues in order to meet the HSF rules for withdrawal of billions of dollars from the HSF. Madam Deputy Speaker, as it relates to the analysis of fiscal measures, after inheriting an economy that was growing year on year, this government successfully flattened and brought our economy into stagnation in 5 months.
5 months.
The review of the economy 2025 produced by this Minister of Finance is estimating a minus 0.8% contraction in the economy in 2025, a complete reversal of the growth curve of previous years. This is after growth of 0.9% in 2022, 1.5% in 2023, 2.5% in 2024 under the People's National Movement. Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing in this budget is designed to address our stagnating economy, stimulate growth over the next year and provide the groundwork for an economic recovery. This is purely a budget of delusion. But it is worse. The Minister of Finance has brought fiscal policies which are contractionary, inflationary, and arbitrary, a fantasy designed to fool the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Deputy Speaker, while this government congratulates itself, businesses will be reeling from increased taxes, surcharges, fees, price, and double cost at the port. In haste to extract revenue, this government has put the business sector under immense pressure, sent up costs, and has set the stage for stagnation to turn into a full-blown recession. And these new draconian and punitive taxes are so hypocritical. In 2020, the Prime Minister, who was then the leader of the opposition, proudly declared, "You cannot tax a nation into prosperity. For a nation to tax itself into prosperity, it is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle of the bucket." A UNC government will lower tax and put money back into the pockets of citizens. Yes, that is lowering taxes. Look at the said UNC government and the said Prime Minister, tax after tax after tax.
Hypocrite.
Who do you think will bear the brunt of these increased costs for businesses? The increase in electricity rates, the industrial and commercial users will be certainly transferred to consumers. People will feel the pinch in every purchase, increase in every freight, will increase in every price of all imported goods. LPG increase will impact restaurants and small food businesses alike. But then, stay home and cook. Stay home and cook. Madam Deputy Speaker, the banks have already stated that it is the customers who will pay the increased taxes charged to them. With alcohol taxes doubled, we'll probably, in many communities, see bars closing down. This country, as persons now curtail their consumption, the UNC, the Grinch that killed Christmas, limes and a killer of carnival banks. Very interesting, Madam Deputy Speaker, the price of the cheapest locally produced bottle of rum has increased from $110 to $160, a whooping 45% increase. A bottle of Stag or Carib will now cost $13. And to add salt to the wound, not factory salt, yes? As his colleagues banged their desks and shouted that this punishment for our citizens was a win for everyone, the minister described these huge increases ranging from 30 to 50% as small. So out of touch are these elitists with ordinary man in the street. It is clear an analysis of these measures indicate it will only stymie business growth and investment and increase prices for consumers. These are clear examples of the contractionary and inflationary fiscal policies in an economy that is stagnating. These policies are not the recommended approach. But the new Minister of Finance will not even admit under his tenure the economy has taken a turn for the worse. So he is obviously in denial. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd now like to deal with some fiscal measures. Let me briefly review some of the fiscal measures and their implications. Levy on banks and insurance companies. 0.25% asset levy on total assets of commercial banks and insurance companies. This will automatically and immediately increase all bank fees to customers. Commercial banks do not have a history of absorbing costs and will pass it on immediately to customers. The Prime Minister said the government will intervene to avoid this possible scenario. The question now becomes how and through what mechanism. And I think every Trinidadian and Tobagonian is waiting eagerly for the intervention and the solution. As it relates to the landlord business surcharge, new registration and requirement for all landlords with the Board of Inland Revenue. This will lead to an immediate increase in rents through the country of all tenants. In addition, since it is going into the consolidated fund, this new tax deprives local government corporations of badly needed funds to maintain local infrastructure and amenities. Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, the dreaded word, property tax, which we have not heard about. And we know that of the 55 Commonwealth countries, 49 have some form of property tax. It is considered an essential mechanism for collecting taxes to fund local government bodies. So notwithstanding the fanfare, the Honourable Minister of Finance was clear. He only halted the implementation of the property tax. It is important for all citizens to know that that piece of legislation is not repealed and therefore still stands as part of the legislative framework. Where, therefore, does he leave property holders, especially those who are selling property, and giving an undertaking to ensure that their property is properly conveyed? And what is the surcharge on property owners who rent their properties? It is not calculated on the net income derived from the rental of property, net of expenses. It is calculated on the gross value of the rental, which is penal. What about the corporations and or individuals that currently rent properties and already tax their income? They too are landlords and now are subjected to another tax at the same income. Similarly, many retirees rent out their properties to supplement their retirement income if they have any and must now pay surcharge too. Madam Deputy Speaker, what hypocrisy. As it relates to the electricity surcharge, a fixed of 0.05 per kilowatt hour surcharge on commercial and industrial users. The increase in electricity rates will be passed on to consumers through food, groceries, manufactured products, and services. Our manufacturers stand the risk of losing their competitiveness in the CARICOM market and further abroad. As it relates to the increase in excise duties, fees, and charges, alcohol and tobacco-related industries will face difficult times. This will have serious negative effects on the tourism industry in this country, since with this move, alcohol is now much cheaper in all the Caribbean islands than that of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago was already struggling to compete with other countries that have a much better tourism product. Several bars and restaurants could very well be facing imminent closure. As it relates to the new National Investment Fund bond, when the first NIF bond was issued under the PNM, the Honourable Prime Minister and then Leader of the Opposition described the NIF as a dangerous and risky fraud and told her supporters to resist it because, according to her, it was a Ponzi scheme. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is yet another 360 degrees turn, similar to the dragon gas. Let them say what they want. NIF 1 and NIF 2 are major success stories of the People's National Movement. And are two of the most successful investment vehicles and gifts to the citizens in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Deputy Speaker, as it relates to higher penalties for traffic offences, the government has virtually scrapped the demerit system introduced by the People's National Movement, which had reduced rate fatalities and road accidents significantly, but now, in yet another flip-flop, wants to implement huge penalties for traffic offences as a revenue-generating mechanism.
Yes.
Some of these offences are very subjective, such as careless driving, and when left to the interpretation of a police officer, could mean anything while you face a fine of $15,000. We wait patiently to see how this is going to be implemented. Removal of motor vehicles tax consenters for returning nationals. Just last week, the Honourable Minister of Finance was quoted as calling on the diaspora to return to the motherland of Trinidad and Tobago now that the UNC is in power. But within hours, the Minister of Finance is de-incentivizing the process by removing the incentive for returning nationals. In other words, they want nationals living overseas to return to live in Trinidad and Tobago, but they cannot bring their personal effects and vehicles without imposition of punitive taxation. Madam Deputy Speaker, it could simply be a case where it could be a system that is not working well. So you revisit it, but to totally eliminate it, that shows the continued level of insensitivity of this government.
Hypocrisy.
As it relates to the adjustment of the LPG subsidy, Madam Deputy Speaker, this will have an immediate impact on small businesses who sell food like Doubles, Corn Soup, Bacon Shack, all the fast food outlets, restaurants, parlors, cafes, roti shops, and a myriad of caterers who sell food to the working people, which must lead to an increase in the price of these food items. The Honourable Prime Minister, who has a habit of making spontaneous statements, was quoted as saying that not many people use the £100 cooking gas cylinder for business purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is absolutely false. As it relates to the national insurance system reform, again, the Honourable Prime Minister, when in opposition, as opposition leader, stated on the campaign trail, any discussions about changing the retirement age, and I'm quoting, any discussions about changing the retirement age would need serious consultations and should be the option preferred by the majority. And should that be the option preferred by the majority, it should be the one by choice. That is to say, those who wish to go home by 60, fine. Those who wish to go home by 65, fine. But you can't tell a man, work his entire life, put his savings in the NIS every week, every month, and you come to tell him now, sorry sir, you can't get it. You have to wait until 65. You cannot continue like that. That's right. In actuality, this measure will add 3% to the national insurance contributions in 2026 and another 3% in 2027, thereby increasing the NIS contribution rate from the present, increasing the NIS contribution rate from the present 13.2% to insurable income to 19.2% of the insurable income by 2027. Is double what was discussed by the PNM and would lead to a 45% increase of the NIS contributions. And of course, if that is not true, Honorable Minister of Finance, you can say that in your winding up. For the average worker earning $7,500 per month, this will increase their monthly contributions from $350 per month, $350 to $500 per month. This wiping out an illusionary win, as stated by the UNC. Further, the Prime Minister, as leader of the opposition, said emphatically that before any increases in the retirement rate is implemented, consultations must be conducted with the population. I want to ask the Honourable Prime Minister whether any consultations was done.
None.
However, no consultation on increasing the retirement age and reducing NIS pensions with any affected stakeholder or any working person. Notably, the trade unions like the PSA, who screamed outrage when the PNM publicly discussed this exact measure with them in 2021 and 2023, they are now quiet as a mouse. And we know at that time there was no trade union that was supportive of that measure. And what is the case now? Quiet. To use the exact words of the PSA in June 2021, still on the website, still on their website. If you go today, it is there. Wow. No to retirement age at 65. Wow. Government ministers, shame on them for suggesting an increase in the retirement age.
Bunch of hypocrites. Right. Misleaders.
As a matter of fact, the words of former UNC Member of Parliament for Couva South at the time, April 2023, speaking on behalf of the UNC, also reveals the sheer hypocrisy of this government. At the time, the Honourable Mr. Indar Singh, at that time, now Judge of the Industrial Court and Shadow Minister of Labour, on April the 5th, 2023, just over 2 years ago, and Madam Deputy Speaker, if I can quote, the recent announcement by the Minister of Finance, Colin Imbert, that the Rowley-led government is seeking to increase contributions to the National Insurance Fund is one of the most oppressive, anti-worker, deceitful stabs in the back of workers across the country.
Deceivers.
The People's National Movement has made mention of a consideration to increase the retirement age, another measure which I vehemently and totally reject.
Wow.
He continued, between the increase in the retirement age to 65 and this new dictatorial move to increase NIS rates, it is clear that this government continues to pick the pockets of the workers of this country. More so, an increase in contribution rates means that all businesses have to pay more to the NIS fund. Given the increases in utilities, property tax, and other related inputs, can this be afforded by small and medium businesses? Increased expenses will lead to businesses closures, which will lead to unemployment. Madam Deputy Speaker, at that time, the People's National Movement had started the discussions and started the consultations. And these statements were in response to mere discussions on the NIS discussions initiated by the PNM years ago, are all now ironically applicable to this UNC government, which according to Mr. Honorable Indarison's logic in 2023 has now come in 2025 like a thief in the night, to use his word to oppress workers and pick their pockets, increase their NIS contributions by almost 50%, reduce workers' disposable income significantly, and damage the livelihood of small businesses without any consultation whatsoever with the population. And then they want to market to you when UNC wins, workers win. Totally misleading,
Pickpocketers win.
fraudulent.
Pickpocketers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I now want to turn to agricultural incentives. The Honourable Minister of Finance made a loud boast about removing VAT on agricultural equipment. However, because of the PNM's policy on the agriculture sector, this sector is already a VAT-free sector. Something the minister should know. This is just smoke and mirrors, garbage and by the Honourable Minister of Finance. As it relates to one of their big marketing strategies, VAT removal on basic food items. They promise to give the population another UNC win by removing VAT on vegetables like cucumber,
Cabbage.
lettuce,
Cabbage.
tomatoes,
And salt.
coconut water, cabbage. Is absurd, and it shows that somebody clearly misled the Minister of Finance. The items that he mentioned fall into the first category of zero-rated items published by the People's National Movement government in 2016.
Wow.
That is
Wow.
unprocessed food of a type for human consumption. It appears that the UNC ministers have become accustomed in the short space of 5 months
Drunk on Moby. Sorry.
of going to places where they do not have a clue that all of these items that they're boasting about already have VAT removals.
Wow.
Clearly, I am very suspicious as to whether they go to the grocery or they go to the market. Because once you go to those places and you get your receipt, you will be able to tell whether when you purchase cucumber, when you purchase tomatoes, when you purchase lettuce in the grocery, you could see what is the situation. I strongly suspect that they are not going to the market and have been going there for years. Ironically, as it relates to possibly the exception of salt, and ironically, the removal of VAT from salt is a clear indication that the UNC now wants the thousands of dismissed workers in CPEP URP to suck salt.
Suck salt. Suck salt. Drink Moby. Salt suckers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, before I conclude, as the first female leader of the People's National Movement, and as an accomplished professional woman in my own right, I must speak on the complete absence of gender equity in this budget. Madam Deputy Speaker, I currently hold the position of President of the Women's Parliamentarians of Trinidad and Tobago. I take note of the fact that a lot of my colleagues on the other side, for whatever reason, has refused to participate in this organization, which is a strong advocate for gender-based budgeting, which is a process that utilizes fiscal policies to promote gender equality. Madam Deputy Speaker, many parliaments all over the world have taken decision to establish women parliamentarians on both sides of the divide. And I hope that it is something that this government will reconsider. Because it does not mean that you have to change your policy on any of your issues. All it means is that women on both sides of the aisle can discuss matters that impact positively on women. Gender-based budgeting, through gender-based budgeting, the gender gap in government policy can be better addressed to serve the specific needs of men and women alike. In consideration of this gender-based approach, I am compelled to ask, what is the gender impact of these allocations, and is there a gender equity component in this budget? With women facing additional barriers in the workplace, the creation and support for childcare centers and homework centers could increase female labor force participation. Why isn't this mentioned in the budget statement? Given the drive towards digitization and the underrepresentation of women and girls in STEM, where are the policies to channel girls towards these higher paying fields without growth opportunities? These are just a few policy considerations I would like to raise, Madam Deputy Speaker. The budget made no mention at all of that word, gender. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the last couple of minutes that I have, I want to use the opportunity to deal with some matters relating to my constituency. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to continue to thank the people of Arima for the opportunity that they have given me to serve them. I heard the Honourable Minister speak about the fact that a water project was done in Arima, and when the UNC wins, the people of Arima win. If they get that market, it is because the plans have already been completed. And like all the other projects, you all simply take it and then take the credit. All right, don't get too excited. I want to say that I know the Honourable Member for St. Augustine gets a little excited every time she hears Arima. I just want to remind you that it's a different A. Arima, not Augustine, right? So let's stick to remain here. I just want to say that it is very important that, and I want to ask the Honourable Minister of Social Development to look very closely at the facility that was completed in Arima some time ago and is yet to officially open. I made representations to your ministry, the Ministry of Social Development, and at that time, the Honourable Minister Donna Cox, because the people of Arima, Blanchisseuse, Monlacqua, Paria, and many places go all the way to Tunapuna. So that I am aware from information received that there was everything put in place for that facility to open, and it's now almost 5 months. So I ask you to kindly look into that issue so that the people of Arima can have the benefit of the use of that facility. I want to also say that under the People's National Movement, the constituency of Arima became the first smart city in the Caribbean, implemented through the Ministry of Housing and the Inter-American Development Bank. And my hope, of course, is that project continues together with the Arima Connect project, which is the one patient, one record. Thanks to the PNM administration, and I know the honorable member for St. Augustine doesn't agree with me, but we have delivered the state-of-the-art Arima Public Hospital. We also opened the Blanchisseuse Health Center, which now includes an incident response unit, a conference center, and a non-communicable disease service. And I say thanks to my former colleague, former Member of Parliament for St. Joseph, the Honorable Terence Dialsing. In 2025, the center received a portable ultrasound machine, improving the diagnostic care of rural residents. And I'm sure all of you agree that challenges exist from time to time for rural communities. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm proud to report as well that the People's National Movement has upgraded the Blanchisseuse and the Lafayette fishing facilities. I have not seen any further allocation in the budget to complete the Blanchisseuse facility, but I will be writing to the Honourable Minister to ensure that that facility is completed. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to raise the issue of the youth for those issues of Blanchisseuse, Lafayette, Brasso Seco, Avocat, Monlacqua, Temple Village, and so on, just to indicate that the closure of the youth agricultural programs, the closure of the reforestation project, the closure of CPEP has resulted in hundreds of persons from those areas not being employed. And I have said to my many constituents who, in some instances, as the Member of Parliament for St. Augustine said, voted for the UNC, they now realize that a vote for the UNC was not a vote for many people who live in the constituency of Arima. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to urge this government to continue to do the upgrade of works in the rural communities. Some of those projects have stopped, particularly in Aripo, Monlacqua, and Brasso Seco. As it relates to the Santa Rosa First Peoples, who receive 25 acres of land on the Arima Blanchisseuse Road, and under the last government was able to receive electricity and pipe-borne water. Our First Peoples, the contract, the CPEP contract, the reforestation contract for the First Peoples has now ended. I took note of the fact that no member of this government attended the conference organized by the First Peoples or their normal ceremony that takes place outside of the Red House, for whatever reason. I just want to remind all of us that the First Peoples were here long before any of us came to Trinidad and Tobago. I want to, notwithstanding, I have a feeling the Member of Parliament for St. Augustine wants to come and live in Arima, you know.
No double palm there. No double palm there.
I just want to record my thanks and appreciation. I want to record my thanks and appreciation to the former Member of Parliament, the former Minister of Public Utilities, the Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, for the improvement of water supply in the constituency of Arima. The Aripo Water Treatment Plant, the Gonapo Water Treatment Plant, and the Community Water Improvement Program. I also want to acknowledge, because when I looked in the PSIP, I saw works to begin on the public library, the velodrome upgrades, and I wait, of course, very patiently for the start of those projects. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to conclude by saying that in this very 5 short months, this government has lost the trust and confidence of the people, and now that the mask is unveiled,
Yes.
and the true plan is at hand, the people are realizing they are taking us to a place where no one wants to go.
That's right.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in 5 months, the government has attempted the following: to completely destroy our National Independence Day celebrations, to completely destroy our nation's achievement of independence, to completely destroy our Republican status, to destroy relations with our CARICOM neighbors, to destroy our Caribbean region as a zone of peace. And in 5 months, the government has fired the board of directors of every state enterprise and every statutory body. In 5 months, the government has tried its best to destroy our racial and ethnic harmony. They have tried to promote...
Madam
Yeah.
Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Standing Order 48-6.
Member for Rima, I suggest that we move on, please.
Thank you very much. Madam Deputy Speaker, we will not support a social crisis brought about by targeting the poor and the vulnerable. We will not support forced austerity in this country and hardship it is causing. The PNM will not support attacking small, medium, and big businesses. The PNM will not support fiscal incompetence and clueless ministers. The PNM will not support the depletion of our forex reserves while misleading the population about cartels. The PNM will not support a devaluation of our dollar. The PNM will not support the government taking the country into a debt trap, and will not support the destruction of a very fabric of our society while the UNC seeks to rewrite our history. The PNM will not support the diplomatic and national security crisis being perpetrated by this government on innocent citizens who now live in fear of being targets in a greater geopolitical game. The PNM will defend the rights and freedoms of all our citizens while the government abuses its constitutional majority. The PNM will defend our independent institutions, which we hold sacred and dear, and which the UNC is determined to destroy. Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget is one of deception, treachery, and betrayal. We warned the nation, and it is sad to say it is coming to pass. This is a government that is so caught up with the limelight of the dance with powers greater than itself that it has forgotten the people and has become tyrannical in its governance. Madam Deputy Speaker, the hope lies in people who refuse to forget who they are and in an inherent pride in ourselves and our struggles. They have demonstrated as the masses congregated to celebrate our independence despite our actions of a wicked government to deny us our patriotic rights. And we made sure, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we were present. The people of Trinidad and Tobago will always prevail, and we are coming together under the banner of unity. They have totally rejected the divisiveness perpetuated by this government and are ready for a safe, steady, and competent hand of the People's National Movement. Madam Deputy Speaker, after they have destroyed all that has been built over the 63 years of independence and beyond, it will fall to this side to rebuild, and we are prepared to do so hand in hand with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Arima, I thank you for your contribution and your response to the 2026 budget reading. Honorable members, I have an announcement to make. On Monday, 13th October 2025, I received a matter of privilege from the member for Couva South in accordance with Standing Order 32-2. The member for Couva South sought leave to raise the following matter. During the sitting of the House of Representatives on Friday, 10th October 2025, members of the opposition bench staged a parliamentary walkout, which was followed by a subsequent statement on their actions by the leader of the opposition and member for Arima. The member for Couva South submitted that under the letterhead of the leader of the opposition on 10th October 2025, the following public statement was issued, and I quote, "After months of enduring bias and prejudicial behavior from the presiding officer of the lower house, all members of parliament on the opposition bench were left with no choice but to leave today's sitting. The pattern of unfair treatment and rulings has continued unchecked and unaddressed. It is now beyond question to unbiased observers that the current Speaker of the House has failed in his duty to act impartially and to uphold the Constitution and the standing orders of Parliament. Since assuming the chair, the Speaker has consistently rejected the majority of urgent questions and the Prime Minister's questions filed by the opposition. His refusal to maintain established precedent on supplemental questions is a direct challenge to accountability and transparency in the conduct of the people's business. Another constant feature of recent sittings has been the uneven and unbiased application of the standing orders. The Speaker routinely overlooks inappropriate behavior from members of the government, including disorderly conduct and offensive remarks, yet is quick to silence members on the opposition bench." End quote. The Member of Parliament for Couva South has raised the matter of privilege based on the submission that the member for Arima attempted to bring into disrepute the independent democratic work of the House of Representatives in the eyes of the public for political gain by questioning the independence of the presiding officer. The member for Couva South submitted that this was an act of, and I quote, "constructive contempt against the House of Representatives, breaching the privilege of the House as the member's actions seek to obstruct and tarnish the democratic as well as independent management, presiding and rulings of the presiding officer." Members, since receiving this on Monday the 13th, I have undertaken significant research and analysis. Members, today I am prepared to rule on this critical matter. Members, the House of Representatives and the Parliament as an institution represent the foundation of democracy. Democracy, whether what side of the aisles we stand, must always be preserved. Preserving democracy means protecting the independence of our Parliament in the public eyes, as well as the operations of its duties. It has always been a precedent of our republic and past parliaments to never bring the presiding officer into the realm of political attacks or aspersions, based on the foundation of protecting the dignity of our parliamentary institutions. Erskine May's parliamentary practice on page 138 speaks to constructive contempt, as it states, and I quote, "Indignities offered to the House by words spoken or writings published reflecting on its character or proceedings have been published by both the Lords and the Commons upon the principle and that such act of abuse tend to obstruct the Houses in the performance of their functions by diminishing the respect due to them," end quote. So, honorable members, in deciding whether a prima facie case of contempt has been made out, the chair must carefully consider the facts alleged and all the information placed before her. I have done just that and find that a prima facie case of contempt has indeed been made out. I so rule and refer this matter to the Committee of Privileges for consideration and report. Members, I now suggest that we postpone the House until 2:17 p.m. Suspend. Yes, we suspend the House for the lunch break and we return at 2:17 p.m.